We have robots that work with people. So now instead of standing on the forklift and operating it, you're sitting at a desk or maybe standing, but you're in control now of an entire fleet of robots. And so we train our models, our AI is trained not only to do the task that it has to do, but to recognize both if it might be dangerous to proceed the way that it's going, or it just is out of distribution. It doesn't know necessarily how to do it. And this is another big strength of using AI in these kinds of systems, is that you're robust. So pallets, not only do they look different when they're produced, but over time, of course, they get bumped, they get scraped, they get ruined, basically. And so they look very different. But thanks to modern AI, you can recognize them whatever the state is. And the technology is moving remarkably fast these days. Things like if you've taken a look at technology, say 3 years ago, and you decided it wasn't ready for deployment yet, things have changed a vast amount. It's really worth revisiting.
Welcome to AI in Manufacturing podcast here on Industry 4.0 TV. I'm your host, Kudzai Mandi Teresa. And today I'm joined by AESHAN Posohi, who is the CEO and co-founder of Third Wave Automation. And we will discuss automating material handling with AI-powered robots. In particular, we're going to focus on autonomous forklifts. AESHAN, it's great to have you on this show today. So maybe to kick things off, could you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and share the journey that led you to founding Third Wave Automation?
Of course. First, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the discussion. How I got here, I've been doing robotics and R&D for a whole career now, I guess, technically. So for quite a while, I've worked on all sorts of robots along the way, and various other topics in starting my career in Sun Microsystems, moving on to Google Research for a while, and then Toyota Research, actually, just before starting this company. And that's where I was exposed to a few things that led me to this. One is some of the labor force issues and elder issues that are happening around the world. Labor forces are getting older and older everywhere, and there's fewer young people entering them. And so these kind of jobs, the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs that we've talked about in robotics for a long time, are becoming much more urgent as these different changes happen in society. And then also talking to the folks that build forklifts through the Toyota network exposed me to a lot of the technical challenges, where it became very clear that modern AI and modern robotics had already solved a lot of these in different environments, and bringing it to the warehouse, bringing it to forklifts was a fantastic opportunity. So I jumped.
Awesome stuff. That's great to hear. I mean, as you know, AI and robotics are really transforming the manufacturing industries. I mean, as you said, really, there's a huge opportunity there. But there's a whole lot of organizations out there who may still be struggling with understanding the agency of adopting these technologies. So from your perspective, what are the key benefits or the business benefits that companies can expect when they deploy AI-powered robots like your autonomous forklifts?
Yeah, well, we bring a unique thing with us, which is what we call shared autonomy, or another term of art for it is human-in-the-loop machine learning. And so we're not selling our customers lights-out warehousing or the promise that the robot's now going to take care of everything and you don't have to worry about it. We have robots that work with people. So now instead of standing on the forklift and operating it, you're sitting at a desk or maybe standing, but you're in control now of an entire fleet of robots. And so we train our models, our AI is trained not only to do the task that it has to do, but to recognize both if it might be dangerous to proceed the way that it's going, or it just is out of distribution. It doesn't know necessarily how to do it. And then it asks for help. So we know there's a person that's responsible for the system, and that you can always say, hey, I don't know if this is safe to do. So a good example of this that's very common is the payload on top of the pallet might be touching the rack next to it. And so it gets hard to model the physics. We make guesses, we interpret, but in real world environments, it's very easy just to ask a person to look at it. They can tell you almost immediately on seeing the image whether it's safe to do or unsafe to do. And that just becomes more training data for us. And then it turns out in real world facilities, in addition to all of this, there's administrative issues that you have to take care of, that you want someone who's worked there for a while, who knows what is supposed to happen to be able to answer the question. And so we solve both of those with our system.
So kind of like, as far as the operation and maintenance of these autonomous forklifts, is there a requirement for kind of like a new kind of skill to be able to operate this?
There is training involved, but it's very much just like it's almost in the younger population that enters into forklift as a first job potentially often is much more comfortable using our system than actually driving the forklift. It's a similar problem as a video game, and only has real world results tied to it.
Okay, interesting. Now, I mean, adopting a new technology always comes with the concerns around, things like return on investment, specifically, which, especially in manufacturing, can be a significant barrier of adoption. So, from your perspective, what should companies consider when evaluating the ROI of deploying autonomous robots relative to the cost of adoption?
Yes. So we've worked that system through by doing an as a service model, so a subscription model. So you're effectively renting our machines, and then the ROI of our customer is immediate because they're able to take advantage of the work that we've done already. They do, of course, still have to employ the operator, as I mentioned, and we just work that into our ROI model. But that one person is able to get a lot more work done and get it done safer. They're no longer in the area where the manipulation is happening. And so the ROI is immediate from their point of view. For us, we have to have a machine there for a few months before we see our ROI.
Oh, okay, interesting. Interesting that you take the SaaS model, or the sort of equipment as a service. Is it the same thing as well?
Yeah. So it's often referred to either as hardware as a service or robotics as a service, depending on what the context is. But exactly that.
Oh, okay. So maybe let's kind of like take a dive into your product offering and solutions. Can you kind of like walk us through the key technologies and products, your product suite exactly? What are the components that are involved?
Yes. So we've automated reach trucks, which is a specific kind of forklift that does the work of moving pallets around very high up in the air, often in narrow aisles. So you want to increase the density in the building as much as you can, and so you make the aisles narrow, and you have this special kind of forklift that is you're standing on it when you operate it, and it can operate in these very narrow aisles. And so we've automated that part. That's the robotics section. And then our shared autonomy part of our product also is a setup that is on the desk, includes a steering wheel and some things that let you operate the vehicle safely from far away. And then, of course, since we're as a service model, we maintain, so all of the maintenance and everything, we make sure the robots are running every day. We make sure that if there is a maintenance issue, that we try and be ahead of it. And having a robot instead of a forklift, we have a lot of sensors running on there that give us early information as to any sort of mechanical failures that might happen. And so we take care of the fleet for you. And so the uptime of our system is measurably better than manual forklifts.
Okay, so you mentioned narrow aisle concept. So I'm not really too familiar with the warehouse kind of like setup. Could you explain to us the idea? Like, for example, the deployment of your systems, do they require a special kind of setup in a warehouse or shop floor system?
No, it's very typical. So in fact, that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on, is that we don't have to install any infrastructure or change any of the racking or anything that's there. So this is a common use case. And the term of art actually is just narrow aisle. And it's roughly an aisle width. So the space between the two racks is between 9.5 foot and 12 foot wide. If you go wider than that, it's just considered an aisle. If you go smaller than that, it's considered a very narrow aisle, VNA. And we don't support that with the machine that we ship. So it's only between that 9.5 foot to 12 foot that our customers typically already have these racks in their systems. And sorry, did that answer the whole question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. And does it does your technology depend only on like the sensors on board the forklift, or do you kind of like also need to install some positioning sensors or things like that? No.
Nothing at all like that. Everything is on the machine itself. I mentioned we do use our customers' Wi-Fi, and if we find that the Wi-Fi isn't sufficient, we can bring our own network with us. But that would, that's an additional service we provide for when it's needed. And then the desk that I mentioned, usually we end up putting those in the break rooms. We'll talk to our customers and decide what to do based on the situation.
Oh, okay, interesting. Now, for many companies or manufacturing leaders who might be considering this transition to autonomous forklifts, I suppose it would be crucial for them to understand the process from like initial decision to like full implementation or like full utilization. So
Yes.
maybe to give us a sense of that, can you explain what a typical workflow and deployment timeline look like for your
Yeah,
forklift?
absolutely. So first, of course, it begins with discussions where we tell our customers, our prospects at the time, what our system can do, what we expect as far as the use case. Make sure that at a high level, there's a good overlap between what they're already doing in their warehouse to what services we could provide. Assuming there is, we get into the next level of conversation. Often, we actually make a map of their facility for them, because that gives us a lot of information we need to start specifying it. And people like looking at maps of their own facilities. I found it's fun to see your own building inside of these environments. And so then we talk to them about what their workflows look like. We get some usage from them of often our customers have what's called a warehouse management system or a warehouse execution system, WMS, that tracks all of the pallet moves that their operators are doing currently. And then we have a team that looks at all that data and says, okay, given what you're doing, we can automate these workflows, and we'll specify them. And even maybe sometimes we suggest if you change this workflow just a little bit, we can automate this section of it, and then we'll keep this section of it manual as you have it, because that'd be the best efficiency for you. And we come back with a rough proposal, is what we call it, for a follow-up conversation. This is usually about a month into the conversation, say. And then if that rough proposal, we get feedback, we come down to a little bit more detail. And then we come back a week later, say, with a proposal, a formal proposal of this is what we can provide. We'll have this many forklifts on your site and be able to move this many pallets per day, given these workflows. If the customer finds that acceptable, and we also have pricing in that contract that we can negotiate or we can talk about. And then we get to that contract being signed. Our team immediately starts talking to the IT team of our customers at that point, both to arrange for any networking requirements that they have as far as their security and so on, as well as setting up for, where does the operator station go that I discussed, and what the timing of forklift deliveries and so on is. We need about 3 months to 4 months to have the forklifts then manufactured and built out to the spec that we need, and then they arrive on site. And the presumption is that IT conversation, and also talking about how to connect to the local WMS that I mentioned, the database of how they organize their workflows. So we have all of that conversation done before the forklifts arrive. Once the forklifts are there, our team arrives on the date that we've all agreed to. We stand them up, we test them, make sure they're running. We typically get to our first production move in about 2 weeks' time, which is absolutely amazing. And I got to give credit to my team here. We can do this faster than like what I just discussed. That's a 2-week process typically takes months for some of our competitors. So we get to our first production move, and then and that's 2 weeks in. In the next 2 weeks, we have our operate the machine and get it to where it do the what we've promised. So numbers that we say our machine can do. So pallets per day, roughly, or sometimes we find some different tests. And then about a month of training where our team stays on site but trains the local operators on how to operate the system. And then a month of what we call shadow training, which is having the customer then operate the machines. But our team stays on site to do more coaching and make sure everything is operating properly. So 3 months into the installation, we hand off the system entirely, and then we're just supporting and making sure that everyone's happy.
Oh, interesting. So, I mean, as far as the intelligence of the forklift is concerned, do you also perform the model training, or do you come with the intelligence out of the box? Like, how is it kind of like able to navigate? Is it part of that?
Yes, yes. So both, yes to both sides of the comment. So it comes already with a well trained. So we haven't gotten to a site in quite a while now where we don't recognize the palettes, say, immediately. And this is another big strength of using AI in these kinds of systems, is that you're robust. So palettes, not only do they look different when they're produced, but over time, of course, they get bumped, they get scraped, they get ruined, basically, and so they look very different. But thanks to modern AI, you can recognize them whatever the state is. And so our system has already gotten to where that works just out of the box. But what we do, and this is what shared autonomy really brings, if we get to, say, one of these palettes and it doesn't look like a palette to us for whatever reason, let's say it's very broken, might be one reason why, we would send that image to the operator and say, hey, this palette looks like something's wrong with this palette. Can you take a look? They see an image of it. They say, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. Or they say, no, that looks dangerous. They can either remote operate the vehicle to do it, or they can say it's dangerous enough that we should just skip this task and someone will go and fix the palette manually later. In any of those cases, we collect the data and we use it to train the model further, sometimes specifically for that site because they don't want to share data with everybody else. And sometimes that trains back to the mother model, so that everyone benefits from the new training data. But in any case, the customer's problem is both solved immediately because we have this loop going directly to an operator, and then also solved in the long term autonomously because that becomes part of the training set. And we pride ourselves, we have some models that learn in what's called few shot training. So we learn very quickly to the particular site that the forklifts are operating in.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, I mean, as you may know, the best way really to illustrate the impact of a technology is through like a real world example. So, do you have perhaps some case study or example of a client who has implemented your autonomous forklift, that you could share with us, and what were the results and some key takeaways from that experience?
Yeah. So we have one I'll share that's somewhat interesting. We have a customer that has payloads that are very large bags, basically full of powder, and those are put on pallets. And so we did that process that I talked about, and we came to an agreement on everything. And then we got to site, and it turns out that these very large bags of powder, because they're powder, they're actually always moving, right? So they're always slowly leaning to one side or another, which can result in dangerous situations if you're not careful. And so they weren't sure if that would be automatable. We thought it would be just fine, and we didn't worry about it. When we got to site, some of these cases kept coming up where they were touching things because they would lean over enough that they touched the rack and so on. And so we had to, exactly through this system where we would go to the operator would say it's safe or not safe, and we would collect the training data and train to where we figured the machine now knows that if it's leaning over too much, and this is all through the machine learning model, so it's in the weights. It knows when it's dangerous and asks for help, but most of the time it just goes ahead and does it because it's not leaning over enough that it's dangerous, which is why standard operators can stand on the machine and move it around.
Awesome. So, I mean, I kind of like want to focus on the kind of like the results for a while here to say, I know you touched on this a bit to say, but especially maybe for this specific example, what was kind of like the key business value, or where were the savings? Is it mostly saving on sort of kind of like the safety issue that they would have to deal with, or more really saving on the labor that they would have to kind of like
it's really no, it's really that one person can now move 10 times as many pallets as they were able to before. So it's a labor saving and a predictability saving as well. You know that the forklifts are going to be up and able to move this many pallets every day. There's, with labor issues recently, often you don't have enough people there every day to run all of your forklifts, which of course you have to move enough pallets in the day. So that results in overtime and extra expense. And so all of the vast majority of this comes from labor savings.
So how do you deal? I imagine there's a big change management issue involved here, kind of like maybe some stakeholders who may feel like this is really uh, um, uh, taking away our jobs, right? So what's your experience with how companies typically handle that scenario?
Yes. So training and communication is the way to do it. So we were talking about that it's the same people operating it, but you're able to get more work done. But that involves training and changing the nature of the job a fair bit, which for some people, they love it. I mentioned there's some segments of people, they actually come by when we're doing our installations and volunteer to get the training and be involved. And of course, some folks have been working on forklifts for a long time, and part of the fun they have is the manual labor part of it. And so that segment doesn't fit, but luckily there's plenty of work to do on both sides of the fence. And so we just work with the folks that want to be off of the forklift, want to be operating in that manner.
Absolutely. So I mean, as you mentioned, kind of like the one of the most important elements really in utilizing your autonomous forklifts is being able to integrate with existing infrastructure. So whether it's like the existing warehouse management system or other operational technologies and IT technologies, what systems do you typically integrate with as far as that is concerned, and do you sort of like support standard connectivity interfaces for that? Can you speak to us about that?
Yes, yes, we absolutely do. So most of these warehouse management systems nowadays have some sort of an API that allows external access. Manual operators, when they're standing on the forklift, often have a little screen that just tells them what to do. And so it's a very similar API for us to use. And so I mentioned between when we make the sale and when the forklifts actually arrive, we work with the IT team. We understand the protocol that they already have. We have the teams work together to make sure that the connection and all the testing and all of that is done before the forklifts arrive. Because, of course, to make sure that that communication is clean, you don't need to actually move anything. You just have to do a few of the transactions and make sure that all of the protocols are easy and clean. And then other than that, getting the Wi-Fi segmented properly for the security folks, which I already mentioned a little bit. And then, so we have some wired connectivity as well. I mentioned that we do training on site for some of our customers, and that involves installing a computer that can handle that training and all that. And so we just run that through the IT team, and we're SOC 2 compliant and everything. So we've not had any issues with that.
Okay, that's interesting. So I mean, you've already touched on the issue of change management, but besides that, what other challenges do you kind of like come across as far as deploying your systems in manufacturing environments is concerned, be it
Yes, yes.
technical or
Yeah,
cultural?
yeah. So every warehouse everything has a long tail, and this is a basic premise I have in robotics and probably actually in life as well. No matter how regimented and constrained you think that it is, there always is a long tail, and it's been true of every site we go to. And so part of our system, I mentioned that we can do remote operations as well of our machines. And so that lets us, when we do the installation, we think we know what all the workflows are going to be and what all the constraints are. And then in those first few months of operation, you find out what the surprises are, what the long tail is. Sometimes it's related to the WMS, and you find out that there's some transaction flow that you have to support that wasn't part of the test set, and so you deal with that. Other times it's physical, what's in the environment, or the things that you need to deal with. That with our remote op system, so what will happen is our system says, okay, this situation is not in my data set. I don't know, it's out of distribution. I don't know how to deal with it. So the message goes to the operator, who can look at it and either say, no problem, just go ahead and do it. And then we start getting that training data. Or they can, if it's very unique, for instance, specialty racking sometimes comes into this. You can actually remote operate our vehicles and take care of the immediate problem. So you put the pallet where it's supposed to be through remote operation. And then we get that data collected as well. It's a learning from demonstration model. Or we just get enough data that our engineering team looks at it and says, okay, this is a case, it's happening often enough now that we have to support this autonomously. And then we start building what we need to build or training the model we need to train to take care of that situation.
Okay, interesting. So I mean, the benefits are just crystal clear, right? Of already adopting this technology, um, but there's still a kind of like a cultural shift, and not just maybe from kind of like from the operators themselves, but from the manufacturing leaders as well, and kind of like how they really uh, deal with new kind of technology. So, what's your advice in kind of like how to approach this onboarding, as it were, of new technology in a manufacturing environment such as the autonomous robots? What
Yeah.
would you say?
So we work closely with our customers on this, and it's all about communication. People want to know what's going on. There's not, as you mentioned earlier, there's this specter of our jobs are being taken away. And if you're clearly communicating what the goal is and what the intent is, what we found at most of our customer sites is that there's plenty of work to do for the amount of people they have. The problem they're having is that they don't have enough people. And so letting forklift operators, some of them end up operating our system and getting the pallets moved. But often it's about communicating what that goal is versus the goal of, piece picking or putting the stuff back in the trucks on the other side, or all of the other tasks that happen in a warehouse. And so the worst thing to do is to not communicate, because then everyone's imagination goes wild. Much better is talking to everyone, saying what we have training sessions, not just for the people that are operating our system, but for everybody in the warehouse to know this is the machine, this is what it does, this is what it doesn't do. And for the local folks without us have to talk to their team about what the goals are and where the endpoints are.
Okay, that's interesting. So I mean, you kind of like make a reference to the warehouse uh, um, as a kind of like a primary domain for your systems. Is that the case, or do you have situations where your forklifts are being used within the shop floor itself just to move stuff from point A to point B, and not necessarily within the domains of a warehouse?
Normally, because of the nature of our machines, it being a reach truck and very tall, we do stuff on the edges. So it's not going from just point A to point B, but going from racking into somewhere near, say, line side, where it then gets delivered through a different system. Or often you deliver it to a place where then a person is responsible for pulling it off the pallet, kitting it onto the relevant carts, and then the carts go into the proper manufacturing line.
Okay, super interesting. So I mean, really, things are moving quite fast in the space of AI and robotics. I mean, how do you foresee the role of these technologies evolving in the next few years, particularly in material handling? Do you have some thoughts to share?
Yes, yes. I think the maturity of the tech has gotten to where these dull, dirty, dangerous. So for a long time, people have been talking about dull, dirty, dangerous jobs, and there really are places where people get hurt, where it's not fun. So thanks to starting this company, I've had the opportunity to run a few full shifts in real facilities, driving the forklift myself. And I like to think I'm not that old. And my body was just ruined by the end of a few shifts. These things are not fun to drive. They are exactly the dull, dirty, dangerous kind of mindset. And there's a lot of that. And so we can get more productivity out of the same buildings with people doing jobs that are much friendlier for people to be doing, and let the machinery take care of jobs that the machinery is good at doing.
Awesome stuff. So, I mean, as we kind of like look ahead, in kind of like in third wave automation's journey, can you share some insights into some upcoming projects or innovations that you have on the pipeline, or what's your long term vision really for the company, and kind of like what to expect, what the industry can expect from you in the future?
Yeah, yeah. So getting better and better at moving pallets around the building. And there's different, so forklifts perform many tasks inside of these buildings. It's not just moving pallets around, but our near-term focus is really about moving pallets better. Next up would be things like clamp trucks and other specialty attachments. So you can think of it as a manipulation problem, and we can expand the ability to manipulate, and then just sort of take all of those jobs where heavy things are getting moved around, whether it's on a specialty rig or if it needs to be clamped, expand into all of those. There's lots of opportunity here.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I mean, so to kind of like close the conversation here, do you have some final thoughts to our audience? So our audience is primarily composed of really manufacturing leaders, and we do have some technical folks, system architects, and some digital transformation leaders. Do you have some final thoughts that you want to say to our audience?
As you've said during this conversation, the technology is moving remarkably fast these days. Things like if you've taken a look at technology, say 3 years ago, and you decided it wasn't ready for deployment yet, things have changed a vast amount. It's really worth revisiting. So consider your pain points, consider what you need to do, and reevaluate would be my thing. Like across the board, machine vision systems have vastly changed, inspection systems have vastly changed, and of course, autonomy has become much more capable in these last few years.
Awesome stuff. So yeah, we'll certainly provide links to your social networks and your company website and everything. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.